Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I have a special guest on today, Lindsay Stamp, who I've met over X or Twitter or whatever you want to call it now. But I noticed, she was an investor in the Pittsburgh market where I invest in, and we touched base and we had a great conversation. And I wanted her to join me on my channel and talk about her story. So welcome, Lindsay.
Thank you so much, Mark. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so maybe give my audience a little backstory about, where you're from and are you from Pittsburgh and kind of what your portfolio looks like.
Yeah, sure. So I'm actually from Erie, Pennsylvania, which is about 2 hours north of Pittsburgh. Born and raised there, grew up, and after high school, I went and played basketball at IUP, which is Indiana University of Pennsylvania. It's a Division II university right outside Pittsburgh, like 45 minutes outside Pittsburgh, and played basketball there. And whenever I was done, I got a job at an insurance company in Pittsburgh, and then I started, lived here for a few years, moved around a little bit, moved to Dallas, moved to Denver. But my family's from here. My in-laws are here, so we moved back here about 2 years ago.
Cool. So was real estate always part of your growing up, or is it something new for you? Or
Yeah, so definitely not part of my growing up. I so the short story is that I was living in Dallas and I was driving to work, and I at the time absolutely disliked, I won't say hate, but I disliked my job a lot. And I was looking for a new podcast to listen to, and I came across Bigger Pockets podcast, and I started listening, and I kind of got hooked on it. And I was listening like every day on my drive and at home. And I started to realize that, there are ways that you can invest your money that you make from your job. And how when you invest your money, it brings you more money, and eventually you can leave your job and leave your situation that you don't necessarily like or enjoy. So that was around 2018, 2019 timeframe that I was listening. And then it came time where we had money to make a down payment on a house and to get started investing in real estate. And so it was like the decision of where do we want to start our portfolio. And for us, we knew this area really well. Family here, we know the area. Whereas at the time we were living, like I said, in Dallas, and then we moved to Denver. Um, Real estate is a lot more expensive in Denver, so it was a little bit harder to tap into the real estate market there than we thought it would be in Pennsylvania. And so ultimately, we decided to buy our first property in 2020 in Erie, in my hometown. And then we just kind of kept parlaying that. So then we bought our second one in 2021. We bought our third one in 2022, and we just bought our fourth property we closed on last week.
and when you say we, who are you referring to?
Yeah, my wife Katie. We do this together. Neither one of us really had any experience in real estate. We both have full-time jobs in what you would call corporate America. But my wife's grandmother, she's been buying property since the 80s, and today she has, a debt-free real estate portfolio that she self-manages. It's her entire, retirement plan. She has over $1 million in paid off real estate. And so we learned a ton about real estate and real estate investing from her.
That is an amazing story, and I haven't met her yet, but the stories that you have told me, it sounds like she's just this feisty old lady, and she has so much wisdom to give you folks. But you touched on it a little bit. So the job that you're working in now, is that the job that you had, like when you said you wasn't hated, you said, but disliked maybe. But is that currently what you're doing also right now?
No. So at the time, I started in the insurance industry in 2015. I started off as a claims adjuster, so I was handling claims. And then I moved into a claims manager role. So then I was managing people that were handling claims. That was the job that I was in at the time that I disliked. And now I've left the claim side of the insurance world, and I'm now a product manager. So I do more back end operations. And I work on our system enhancements, workflows, um, kind of the go between the people that handle claims and the people that, the engineers and developers that create our systems. So I absolutely love what I do now, which is why it's not a problem for me to go to work and use the money that I make to buy real estate. And I say love because I've had so many other jobs that I really didn't like, that this feels like such a step up. But at the end of the day, if I was able to leave this and go into real estate full time and manage my properties, I would take that in a heartbeat. But I'm just not to that stage yet.
Yeah, I think, you see so much on social media now, all these people wanting to retire early or just, they tell people, quit your W-2, jump into real estate or jump into a business. And, that's not for everyone. And I think like you're saying is, you can have a job that you love or enjoy going to, but at the same time you're trying to build something else because there's one day that for some reason maybe you get a new boss or something changes at work and maybe that job is not as enjoyable going to, so you're just giving yourself options. Is that kind of how it's going?
Most definitely. I feel like, I'm not in a hurry to leave what I have going now. I mean, there are definitely things about it that I don't like and things that I don't love, and I don't love commuting. And I don't love, some aspects of the job, but I also feel like that's with anything that you do. And so because I've done other jobs that I really disliked, it really puts into perspective how blessed I am to be in the place that I am in now. And I think that that plays a huge part in me not, being in a hurry to leave, because a couple of years ago, I was dying to leave my career and I couldn't wait to just go do something else and be done. And now looking back, I'm so grateful that I stuck with it, because it got me to the place that I am today. And making decent money, and I'm able to live my life the way that I want to live it and also have that stability of a paycheck.
So let's kind of touch on maybe the Pittsburgh market. So that's where I invest also, and that's kind of what connected us. But maybe you can give my audience a little bit more information on maybe why I like Pittsburgh. And apparently, you founded a great market to invest in also, but maybe a little more information about Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I think, Pittsburgh, there's a lot that I like about the city. And one of the things I like is the size. It's not a huge city in comparison to other places that I've been and other places that I've lived. But it's big enough to where there's opportunity, there's jobs, there's things to do, there's sports teams, of course. And another thing that was a draw for me to invest here is that it's still one of the places in the United States that has reasonable cost of real estate. There are great neighborhoods that are safe, that have great school districts, where you can get a really decent house for a fair price. And I think that was one of the main things that attracted us to starting our real estate portfolio here, because we were so inexperienced and we didn't know what we were getting ourselves into. We didn't want to buy our first property in Denver for $500,000 or $600,000 and have this big risk, this big exposure, this big debt payment, not knowing what was going to come of it. I think in that scenario, you have a few months where you don't have a tenant or where your tenant's not paying. And that gets really scary, if you're not in a position where you can afford your rent or your mortgage at your place and the extra mortgage on the place of your tenant who's not paying. And so in Pittsburgh, when real estate is reasonably priced, we've set up our portfolio in a place where if tenants don't pay rent, we can afford to make the monthly mortgage payments in addition to our living payments, without having like a catastrophic type event. And I think that's really an underrated perk of buying in a place like Pittsburgh.
I love it. That's what attracted me to that market also too. And I think, was it last week you just closed on your fifth one, you said, or fourth?
Fourth one.
Yeah, so we were supposed to have this conversation earlier, but your
Yep.
closing got pushed back. So I was like, hey, of course. But so your fourth one, so from your first one to your fourth one, would you say there's been how's that learning curve been? Like what's changed since that first property you got?
Yeah, so the properties that we've got have been kind of different. Different types of properties, different amounts of work needed for each of them, different sizes, different uh, price points as well. So we've kind of dabbled in a bunch of different properties, I guess I would say. Our first property we bought is a single family home. It has a detached two-car garage, and it didn't really need any work. We put about $1,500 into repairs, like very, very minor roof repair and some other super minor things. Our second property that we purchased, um, that property was a full renovation, so 100% down to the studs, um, all new electric, all new plumbing, new roof, all new drywalled walls. Everything is brand new, and it was a property that we were able to buy for a cheap price, but it took a lot of money in renovation costs. The third property was um, a property that I absolutely love. The plot of land that it sits on is so cute. It's right by the lake, and that property also needed quite a bit of work, not as much as house two, but was not like move in ready. And then this fourth property that we purchased barely needs any work again, kind of like the first one. So the fourth one, it is new paint, some new light fixtures, um, curtains, just very minor things. So we've done kind of like a different approach on each one. And I think it's just been dependent on if the deal works, if the numbers work, the location, those types of things.
So like you kind of touched on it a little bit, but do you think your guys, I guess maybe buy box now is kind of geared toward your experience? Like you're saying, the second one was like a full gut rehab. Like after that experience, has that kind of changed your view on maybe like, this is not what we want to do, or like how has that affected you?
Yeah, I mean, definitely was a learning experience to say the least. So something that happened with the second property, we actually hired a contractor, somebody that we knew and had kind of a recommendation for. Um, we paid him quite a bit of money, and then Hurricane Ian happened at the end of 2022, I want to say, and he just picked up and moved to Florida to work on hurricane homes. So in the middle of our project, like just ran off, and we never heard from him, which is really crazy. So we've had some interesting experiences, but I also feel like I'm really glad it was a pretty inexpensive home, like I said before, that we were practicing on and learning on, and now the people that we use, the people that we work with, are pretty much recommendations from my wife's grandma, who she's worked with for years, and has a good relationship with. So it's more of like that trust aspect of who you're going to work with, who you're going to hire, what kind of work they do. Like having a solid team around you is insanely important. But to answer your question, would I do another full gut? I would, but I'm not as excited about doing that.
There's so many directions I want to go from this, but first, you kind of touched on it, like you're talking about the price point makes doing a rehab, you have a little more wiggle room. It wasn't
Yeah.
as where you're doing $1 million rehab. And I think that's, I know a lot of people in Hawaii, the prices are super expensive. And that's why they get started doing, even if it's remotely and out of state, as far as doing a burr strategy or a full rehab. But that's why they do it in these smaller markets where you kind of can get your feet wet, get your systems in place, and you learn how everything works. But you're not putting this huge commitment to like $1 million flip or something. And I think that's a great point you make. So the price point is super important. But you also touched on it too a little bit. Your wife's grandma. I mean, has she been so from that first purchase, did she kind of guide you folks on that one, or did you kind of like keep it a secret that you guys were getting into real estate and then bring it up to her?
Yeah, so we kind of bought the first one on our own. That was one that we just, went off and did, and really glad we did. But the second one was an off-market deal that we did, and actually, the person who wanted to sell the home knew her. So they went to her and basically asked if she was interested in purchasing the home because she owns other homes on the street. So he went to her and said, "Hey, do you have any interest?" And she was like, "Yeah, maybe, but my granddaughters might, be interested as well. Let me talk to them." So she's actually the one that brought us deal two, and deal three was another off-market property, and it was a family friend of mine who owned the house since 2000 and was ready to leave, and just reached out to me knowing that I was in the early stages of getting into real estate. And so those two were off market, and then the fourth one on market. And so I would say two and three, she's had a lot of advice, and a lot of, she's been involved in those ones. And then one and four have been more so kind of on our own.
So, I've never met your wife yet, but was this something she was on board with from the beginning, or was there convincing, or did she convince you to do this?
No, she's 100% forward. I can't honestly say enough good things about her. Her name's Katie. I can't say enough about how supportive she is, and I come to her with the craziest ideas. Like, I'm constantly, my mind is always going, always racing, and like, it's funny, it'll like at night I'll just be like, my mind's just on, I can't turn my brain off. And she listens to me and gives her feedback, and she's just insanely supportive of my ideas. And she knows, I think, that I don't go into things lightly, and I put a lot of time and effort into the decisions that I make and thinking things through. And so I think she trusts me in those ways. But she's 100% on board, and she knows that when the real estate portfolio takes off, which it eventually will someday, she knows that she'll be the first one to quit her job. And like, I think that's a little bit of a motivation for her, because she wants that too. She wants to stay home and raise kids and do all that kind of thing. And she knows that we're getting closer and closer to that. So I think that's a bit of a motivator.
So do you guys kind of have like maybe separate roles? Like maybe one is more focused on the acquisition of it, one is doing more of the managing of the property.
Yeah, I would say it's pretty even. She recently has done a lot of like posting the property whenever, to get a new tenant, showing the property in communication with potential tenants. As far as looking around for properties, finding deals, we pretty much do that together. And then if there's financing involved, I have kind of been the one to work with the lender and kind of get the loan in place and things like that. But I would say it's a pretty good split of divvying up responsibilities. We both have day jobs, and he works from home 100% of the time, and I go to the office where I work 3 days a week. So, um, you know, when there are situations that I just can't handle because of what I'm doing, she steps in, and vice versa. I think we have a really good balance of working on this together and bringing this to life, if you will.
Cool. So, my vision has changed quite a bit since the first, out of state property I got. When I first started, I was like, I want this huge portfolio. I want 100 units. I want to do all these things. And then after, I'm kind of like, maybe, 10, 20, or, even four, maybe that's all I really need. Has things changed for you from that first property or from when you first started thinking about going down this route?
100%. 100%. I think at the beginning, It was like, if I can just buy one a year for the next 10 years or 15 years, like, by the time I'm 55, they'll be paid off and I'll have, all this debt free, you know, real estate portfolio. And I think I was super ambitious at the beginning. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. People that want to have 10, 15, 20, 50 portfolio or 50 properties, like, I don't knock that whatsoever, but I don't think that's for me. And not so much the work that goes into managing the properties. It's more so the exposure, the leverage, the risk. That's what I kind of am not as fond of, I guess, as I go through this, kind of mature and like learn about real estate, like having these big amounts of debt hanging over your head, is just not something that I feel like is for me personally. I more lean towards having a handful of really great properties that can be paid down and eventually paid off. And obviously they're going to cash flow much better when they're paid off, and keeping it much smaller. But the other part of that is that I love investing in the stock market as well. And so about 2/3, I would say, of our invested dollars or net worth is in real estate, and 1/3 currently is in the stock market. So I think I'm going for more of like a hybrid approach of having a solid portfolio of real estate that cash flows monthly, and then also having, stock investments to eventually cover the money that we make from our jobs, and so we can walk away at some point.
Yeah, I think that's you make a great point, right? There's no one right way to do it. There's so many different strategies. I think the biggest thing though is that you have to do something though. I mean, if you just kind of rely on the traditional path of just putting money in your retirement accounts, and there's nothing wrong with that, but definitely if you have visions of you know having traveling and having a little more freedom, you definitely have to kind of think outside the box and kind of do some non-traditional things, and definitely just getting started is the biggest thing.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, I I know, like, when I started in the corporate world 8 years ago, it was one of those things where I felt like I didn't have anything to lose at that point. Like, I can wake up every day and drive to a job that I don't really like and get a paycheck and do this and just put my money in my 401k. And then when I'm 67, I can retire and hopefully live for a few years, or I can take some risks, buy some real estate, invest in the stock market, and potentially, retire in my 40s. And for me, it was a no brainer because at the end of the day, I kind of felt like if I take risks and I fail, I can get a job. I can go back to trying that other route. But that's really just never been me. I remember I was like a year into my job, and I've been at the same company for all 8 years since I graduated college. I've worked for the same company. And I remember it was like 2016, and I got this letter in the mail that said, uh, like, as of today, you'll retire in 2052 or something. And I was just thinking, like, there's no way I'm going to sit here and do this until 2052. And that's when my mind started going of like, okay, if I don't want to do this forever, then what do I do? And so I think, like you said, that's more of the safe route. And it wasn't appealing to me whatsoever to do that. So that's how we're here.
No, yeah, I wish I did so many things a lot different when I was younger. And, I'm amazed when I see, people younger than me, just having this different mindset and thinking outside the box and just realizing that you don't have to follow this path that we've all been kind of led down and told to believe. You got to go to college, get a great job and just get with benefits, and like you said, retire what 65 or something you were saying, or whatever
Yeah.
age they took. Yeah, but just it doesn't have to be that way. And there's a lot of alternatives out there, and I'm just amazed when people get started. And I love hearing these kind of stories. And it's not like I'm way ahead of you or anything, but just I love
Yeah.
hearing these type of stories that people get started and get on the property ladder and the rentals. And you have a great example with your grandma that probably tells you all these stories. And I'm surprised, like I think we touched on it, like, maybe her horror story. Did she have horror stories that almost prevented you folks from getting started?
Oh yeah. Yeah, oh definitely. I mean, we've learned a ton. I mean, there's for probably 30 years that she owned real estate, she never did leases. It
Oh
was
yeah, you
all
told
kind
me
of a
that.
handshake, shake of a hand and cash on the first. And, I think we've learned a lot about screening tenants and, putting time and effort into the people that you choose to rent your places to. But on the other side, the other things that we've learned are that she pretty much bought property at the speed of cash, which I find, it's very, very hard to do nowadays, obviously, with the cost of living and the cost of real estate. In the 80s and the 90s and the early 2000s, it was obviously much easier. But at the same time, I still find it to be very impressive that people would work a job, save up their money until they had the full amount of money, and then go buy a property in cash and never have any debt. um, you know, I think that's like a really crazy accomplishment and an underrated way of handling real estate. And I definitely admire that. So there are things that, maybe if she was looking back, maybe she would have done differently, and things that we've seen that we're like, okay, I'm not going to do that. But there's also a lot of things that she's done that I'm like, I definitely want to do that. And I find value in that. And I think things that she did really well.
So before we, kind of wrap things up, if you were getting started today, or helping someone get started today, what would be maybe, 2 to 3 things that kind of advice or what you would recommend for them to do to get started?
Yeah, I would say to get started, I think sometimes people underestimate how much money they're going to need to do a deal, because it's more than just like, can I make the down payment and then can I afford the monthly payment, or is this going to cash flow me a few $100s every month? It's way more than that. I think like it's best to kind of pump the brakes a little bit and get to a position where not only do you have a really solid down payment, depending on your financing and how you're doing the deal, but really solid cash reserves. Because things always go wrong. Things always take longer than you think they're going to take. They're always more expensive than you think they're going to be. And so, like, knowing going into it that, I expect this project to take 3 months, plan for several extra months. And I think this project's going to cost me $15,000, plan for 25,000. You know what I mean? So I think having those reserves for any renovations that you're going to do, or reserves for a situation where, you have a tenant and now the water heater goes out and the, you know, the dishwasher's leaking and the roof has a leak or whatever the case is. It's going to be anything. But um, taking your time, I think, and being a little bit slower to make sure that you really have a buffer is one thing I would definitely recommend. And something else I would say is if you're just getting started, I wouldn't be looking to go for a home run off the bat. I wouldn't be looking to go for the best and biggest and most expensive property that you can qualify for. I would go for something that is well below what you qualify for so you can practice, so you can learn and make mistakes. And then as you buy more, adjust your strategy a little bit, just to based off of what you learn to not make the same mistakes over and over.
I totally agree. I was on another podcast earlier today, and I touched on that also. And I kind of look at it as trying to, and I don't want to give any relationship advice because I'm definitely not the one to listen to, but I kind of look at it as looking for a spouse, right? If you just keep waiting for that perfect one to come around, you could be waiting your lifetime. And like you're saying, just find a solid good deal. And that's kind of like what dating is, right? You're meeting different individuals, you're figuring out your strengths and weaknesses, and you're trying to see, if this person is compatible. And same thing with like the properties, right? You learn so much from that first deal that you make, and you're just gonna kind of layer on top of that and figure out if this works. If do I want to be in short-term rentals? Do I want to do fix and flip? Do I want to do the burr strategy? Or I just want to do boring buy and hold, right? And I think that's what it comes down to.
Yeah, most definitely. And I think, you have to go into it knowing that you're going to make some compromises. If you are really set on your price or you're really set on your location, like you sometimes, especially starting out, you're not going to get everything that you want. You're not going to get the perfectly priced home in the perfect area with, no renovations needed or very minimal. Like you're not going to get every single thing on your list. So I think you have to be selective about the things that are very important to you, and then things that you might be able to negotiate with or compromise on, is important. And I also think, if you're somebody who's been planning and reading books and listening to podcasts and things for years and years, and you haven't pulled the trigger and you have all of the resources to do so, I would say pull the trigger. I mean, you can only analyze and assess so much before you get analysis paralysis. I think at some point, if you have the money to do it and you've done your research and you have found a good deal, the best learning experience is going to be by doing. I think you learn the most hands-on in the experience than you can ever learn, reading a book or listening to somebody else's experience.
Yeah. Well, what about like networking, or even like, like you have your grandma to, pick her brain or ask questions. So is that why you're on X? Is that why you hopped on X to network and meet other investors and whatnot?
100%. Yeah. I don't have a lot of people in my real life, I would say, that are investors. I don't have any, I have one friend, I would say, who has invested in real estate. But my friends really aren't too much into real estate. They maybe invest in the stock market a little bit here and there, but I don't really have like a solid group around me that I can ask questions on or get advice from, aside from, some family members. And so being on X and having people and resources at your fingertips 24/7 is an insane hack. I've met some great people. I've learned so much. I've made tons of connections. I've talked to people I probably never would have been able to otherwise. And I think there's little interest, like intricacies that you don't think about, like tax planning and, just any, small management style. You know, if you're going to personally manage or you're going to hire a management company, other people's management companies that they use and what they recommend. I mean, there's so many things that you can learn. And I love X for that reason.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm sure a lot of, my circle that invests in Pittsburgh, from Hawaii would love to connect with you and then pick your
Yeah.
brain. So where can people find you or reach out to you at?
Yes. So on X, I'm at Lindsay Stamp 3. And I don't really use any other social media. I don't have a website or anything. I'm just active on X. So I would love to connect. I would love to chop it up, especially with Pittsburgh investors. So hopefully that happens.
Is three your basketball number?
It was.
I figured that, but
Yeah. So just tiny backstory. I made my Twitter account in 2011. And I have had the same account the entire time. And when I started in August of this year that I was going to start posting, I had like 500 followers, and most of them like were just people that had followed me because of basketball and some friends and people that I had met just, over the years. And so when I started posting and like meeting people and growing, I just never took the time to stop and change my handle or change my name or anything. So I'm just gonna rock out with Lindsay Stamp 3 for now.
yeah, it's funny, right? Because we go through different chapters, and sometimes you're not thinking about it when you first set up your account or what handle or
Right.
what name you use. And yeah, I mean, it's weird, but it's fun. It's interesting, everybody has different chapters, and you just see the journey. Um, But you also mentioned this was kind of your first interview or podcast. But I just want to say, you did a great job, and this was a lot of
Yeah.
fun. And I hope to have you back on again. And maybe you can bring your wife and your grandma on. And I have a feeling your grandma's going to have some great stories to talk about.
She's a firecracker. I'm sure your audience would love her. But yes, I appreciate you having me on. I would love to come back sometime, and I know we'll keep in touch and many more podcasts to come.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, thanks for coming on, and we'll do this again.
Yeah, sounds good, Mark. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Bye bye.
Bye.